when the leading robotic oncologist of the nation calls you his mentor, I think it's easier to just pass the plate and sit down. I'm humbled, I'm honored. But when they read your credentials, you're almost sure that you're at your funeral because they're saying all these nice things about you. And I know some of you are wondering, how old are you if you've done all those things? Well, this past January, I just celebrated the 41st anniversary of my 20th birthday. For the mathematically challenged, I'm 61, but I began right here, further north in Visakhapatnam. My career took a trajectory unlike anything I've ever thought possible. Now, most of you growing up in this beautiful state or the former state that was together know somebody who's a gold medalist. You know somebody who's a silver medalist. Just about every parent that bragged on their children said, my child came first in the university. My father had that dubious distinction of telling everybody that because your son came first, someone had to come last. My son came last so that your son could be first. I was an outstanding student, standing outside most of the time. I learned to kneel in front of my Lord much later in life, but that practice came early when the principal asked me to do that outside his office many a time. Today's topic is interesting because there are 3 or 4 components to what we call the call, the caller, the calling, and the called. Without getting into too much of the semantics, I'm going to take a very easy, introduce you to 3 people, share with you 4 moods, and then entertain some questions at the end. My plan is to flap my gums for about 40 minutes, and then we'll entertain some questions. When I landed in the United States in 1986, the prevailing mood in America was, oh, you Indians are so smart. And I thought, wow, now I can play the biggest con game of all. Before they find out I'm a dummy, I'm going to ride this wave. So I just pretended I was smart. Now, what does that mean? The number 1 rule to understand where you are in this journey is a word called confidence. But the reason most of us come up short in this journey is because we confuse confidence with arrogance. Many of us expect to succeed and enter into the professions we think we deserve to make our mark. That's arrogance. Confidence plus competence allows you to win every time. Skill and will are both required in order to make a manifest living. Granted, I'd had none of the skills earlier on, but later on I developed an ability to impact lives and change fortunes. I have spoken for every company from AT&T to Walmart, and I have never let my faith take a back seat. Now, there are 3 things I know. 1, there is a God. 2, it ain't me. And 3, it ain't you either. So let's get that out of the way. The reason I think about this is I'm not a theologian. I have never been to a seminary. By God's grace, I've not yet gone to a cemetery. But somewhere between womb and tomb, God's placed a call on my heart. And I'm going to share those with you. I'm a storyteller. And I'm going to introduce you to 3 people. The first person I want to introduce you to is a man by the name of Strive Masiawa. Strive Masiawa was an engineer with an idea. He was a resident of the country of Zimbabwe during the height of Robert Mugabe's dictatorial reign. Strive Masiawa, an idea. His idea was his call. He said, I want to introduce telecommunications to sub-Saharan Africa, where at that time, 75% of sub-Saharan Africa had no telecom. Now, he was an engineer with an idea, a call on his life to revolutionize a continent, but was under the throes of the dictator, Robert Mugabe, who, aside from Kim Jong-un, had the greatest or worst human rights record. 5 years was this landmark case as Strive Masiawa sued the government of Zimbabwe, which was being run by a dictator. 5 years later, he won the case, and overnight went from an engineer with an idea to a net worth of $600 million, and now runs an organization that has a market cap of roughly $3 billion. Now, Strive Masiawa's wife, Sisi Masiawa, started a foundation called the Capernaum Trust. Her goal was to take the orphans of AIDS in Zimbabwe, where either one or both parents had perished to that deadly disease, give them scholarships so that they could come back and impact a nation. She had no money either. Strive said, the moment I make it big, I will write you a big check. And the first check he wrote her was for $6 million. When she got that check, I was one of the people asked to come to the country of Zimbabwe to equip the people on skill and will. So I share the story from personal testimony. But many years later, Forbes magazine wrote about the 5 principles that affected Strive Masiawa's life. Now, here's a secular magazine that talks about the who's who in the world, is now suddenly focusing on a young businessman from Africa who went on to become Zimbabwe's first billionaire. This man now sits on the board of directors of the Rothschild Foundation, sits on the board of directors of Morehouse College, which produced the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Here are the 5 principles. If you want to adhere to something that will bridge the gap, these 5 should liberate you right off the bat, if I say nothing else. First, find a human need and fill it. Find a human need and fill it. Dr. Chinababu right here does this cancer screening. It's a human need. Someone had to fill it. Second, work hard. There's no substitute for hard work. Third, be relentless. Be relentless. It's like the story of the young kid who always would sneak into this little small town grocery store. And when the owner of the grocery store was not looking, he'd run his finger through the jar of honey, lick it, and run out. And one day the owner said, I'm going to teach this kid a lesson. As soon as he caught him, he took his head and dunked it into the whole jar of honey, thinking it would scare the kid. And the kid said, so much opportunity, so little time. That's being relentless. What are you relentless at? What is your cause celeb? What is your one non-negotiable? Most of us wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and say, mirror, mirror on the wall, do I have a prayer at all? If the mirror ever looked back at you and said, with that kind of face, go back to bed, listen to the mirror. If you walk around looking like the picture on your driver's license, not anybody going to treat you like a glamour shot. Why do we frown so much when medically it has been proven that it takes more effort to frown than to smile? We're naturally doubters. So first, find a human need and fill it. Second, work hard. Third, be relentless. Fourth, give back. You will never find a successful person who's self-involved. Other people can give you pleasure, but you will never find true happiness until you learn to do something for someone else. My mentor, Mr. Ziegler, always put it this way: you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. But that has to be a philosophy. It cannot be a tactic. You cannot say, I'll do for you today, so I can expect from you tomorrow. So first principle was, find a human need and fill it. Second, be relentless. Third, work hard. Fourth, give back. And 5, pray. This is a secular magazine having to say, Strive Masiawa, a devout Christian, never took a decision without getting on his knees and praying. Why is that important? When you look at your 24 hours in any given day, the 2 components that make up your day are the skill that allows you to make a living and the will that allows you to shape a life. But when that skill and will come together is when the call, the calling, and the caller begin to merge. Now, I'm not talking about job. Job is just over broke. That's what a job is. Jobs give you dental benefit and mental benefit. Career allows you to have impact. Career allows you to move the goalpost at will. Career allows you to make dramatic changes. Earthquakes and hurricanes get all the publicity. Termites do more damage. You can make radical changes in minute steps. Change agent Eric Hoffer said, in times of change, it is the learners who will inherit the earth, while the learned will find themselves beautifully equipped for a world that no longer exists. As we navigate to the other couple of other people I'll introduce you and the 4 moods, I want to give you a blanket statement. I never deal in absolutes, but this one is pretty close. If culture is your only strategy, tradition is your only formula. Culture and tradition eat us alive because we adhere to the wrong motives and refuse to change. I remember early in my career, I was working for Mr. Ziegler. Now, my culture taught me, as I grew up in India, that the white wizard who's older than you is always going to be wiser than you. Age meant maturity, youth meant inexperience. So you stand 2 feet behind the guru. And Mr. Ziegler said, boy, where are you? I said, right behind you, sir. He said, how come every time I need you, I have to look for you? I thought your job was to make my life easy, but it's becoming work finding you. I said, so my culture won't allow me to walk next to you because you're elevated and I have to be subservient to you. Culture, tradition, noble, respectful, loyal, honorable, ineffective. It had all the trappings of bowing down, but had none of the solution. He looked at me and he says, if I have to look for you, I don't need you. Figure it out. Now, here's the irony of ironies of how simple it is to bridge that. There are only 3 possible positions you can have with somebody you're walking with. Behind them, which he didn't want. Next to him, which I couldn't do. So stand in front of him, which nobody objected. I stood in front of him. He saw the back of my head, and I took him all over the world. I went on to write a book with him. I became the vice president of operations. When I came back from that first trip, Mr. Ziegler said, I want this boy around me forever because he has the intellect to come up with solutions that nobody has thought of, and none of them cost money. Here's the irony. Most of us think our solutions are complex, and you know why? Because when we fail, not if, when we fail, we can blame the system. We can blame the government. We can blame the corporation. We can blame HR. For me, HR just stands for Heaven's Review. So I don't believe in HR. In fact, my company, even though it's a secular company, believes in the 10 Commandments. They just don't want to admit it. When I asked my HR director, I said, you believe in the 10 Commandments. You just chastise me because I believe in them for a spiritual reason, but you actually believe in them, but you don't follow them. He said, what do you mean? I said, try killing someone on the job. See how long you last. Try stealing. Try coveting. These are all God-given moral laws. The number one thing to understand the difference between will and skill is ask yourself, is the tune you're dancing to come from a moral law and a moral lawgiver? Is there some kind of disciplinary substance in the way you define your daily routine? So the first person was Strive Masiawa, who I introduced. Second person I want to introduce you to is a man by the name of Albert Schweitzer, 1952 Nobel laureate. He was a person who was a philosopher. He won it for philosophy of life, but around the early 1900s actually was antagonistic against the faith of his time, even though he was a Christian. He argued about the doctrines of that time, because he was a philosopher. He came from the region of Alsace, which is near Austria, from where you get the dog's name, Alsatian. But Albert Schweitzer had a call. He wanted to go and serve the people who were very poor, had no medical training. The Paris Missionary Society rejected him because of his doctrinal differences within the Lutheran Church. They said, why don't you find someplace else? But the call on his heart was true to his origin. So he went back to medical school at the age of 30, and then went to what is now modern-day Gabon and set up a practice and a hospital that still flourishes to today, where people come on canoes around the river bend. Late into his life, when people asked Dr. Albert Schweitzer, Nobel laureate, how goes it, Dr. Schweitzer? He said, my sight is a waning. It's going away, but my vision is clearer than ever. What are you willing to do at the age of 30 and 35 to pivot so that the call? People ask me, how do you know your call is from up above? I said, when it is from up above, you'll sleep peacefully. If it is not, you'll stay awake all night asking whoever you believe to change their mind. God is not a God of chances or oops. He doesn't move, but he exists outside of time. Now, I'm not a scientist. People always ask me, well, you know, what scientific evidence and this, and I'm not a scientist. All I know is when I go to the zoo and I see monkeys in a cage, I'm pretty sure the monkeys are not having an existential argument saying, what did we do not to evolve? I wonder which lottery he won, so he comes and sees me by paying money and I have to eat bananas and look like an idiot. Common sense is not common practice, but we all err on the side. So first I introduced you to Strive Masiawa, now a billionaire. Then I introduced you to Albert Schweitzer, whose call was different. I'm knowledgeable, I'm smart, I'm a philosopher, I'm going to win a Nobel Prize. The world is going to take notice, but I am going to bend my back and go back and get medical training at the age of 30 so I can go serve the dying and the destitute. Now let me introduce you to a lady in this nation who you elevated and gave the Bharat Ratna to, Mother Teresa. I had the privilege of meeting her in 1994, and I got a letter from Mother Teresa when I did some work for her, and that letter kind of changed my own trajectory. When in the letter to me she wrote, Dear Krish Dhanam, say yes to the least of humanity. By picking up those most deserving in the eyes of a loving God, you will have participated in the greatest good of all. Now, here are a couple of stories on Mother Teresa's call. Came to India from Albania, or she was born in Skopje, which is modern-day Macedonia, but that was Albanian territory. But she came to India primarily to work as a geography teacher, eventually became a headmistress. The first time she got a call to serve the very poorest of the poor was on a train to Darjeeling, and she rejected it. The second time, the call was so overwhelming that she accepted it. But the call was so bizarre, it asked her to forsake, saying, if you're going to serve the poor, you have to be poor. The sisters who work with the Missionaries of Charity, and I've spoken at the Mother Teresa Awards, the sisters who work with her have two pair, the white saris with the blue border, one pair of plastic footwear, and two plastic utensils. That's it. Vows of ordination 6 levels deep, just so that they can serve the dying and the destitute. In her book, No Greater Love, Mother Teresa puts it this way. One day I was walking the hot, scorched streets of Calcutta. The asphalt was melting around the body of a man decayed. This may be a little graphic, but it's before dinner, so you'll be all right. She said, as I picked him up, part of his body lay stuck to the tar, riddled with maggots. Yet that person, who half his body had been left behind and the other half in my arms, said this, I have lived the life of a dog on the streets of a nation. I'm going to die looking into the eyes of an angel. Calling. Mother Teresa tells another story of how one day at Shishu Bhavan, she took a kid and gave him to a very rich Bengali businessman. Found out about 6 weeks later that that child had contracted some kind of a terminal condition that would forever limit that child's ability to be normal and grow progressively. Mother Teresa sent word to the businessman and simply said this: "Give me back that child, I'll give you a better one." And that child said, "What? This is my child. I can't give it back to you." She says, "No, you could. I'll only leave this child with you on one condition, if you promise me that no, not once, even in an iota of a fraction of a millisecond, will you even think, what could have this child's life been if he was normal? God has given me a propensity to love like none other on earth. If you make me that promise, I'll leave you the child." So 3 people, 3 different calls, 3 different outcomes, all game changers. 70 world-class leaders, I'm talking Mother Teresa, Clara Barton, Eleanor Roosevelt, Mahatma Gandhi, 70% of these 300 world-class leaders either began in abject poverty or had some kind of a debilitating illness at a young age that would have prevented them from doing anything. Annie Johnston Flint had rheumatoid arthritis. She succumbed to uterine cancer, but she pounded out some of the great hymns of our time. Can you imagine rheumatoid arthritis, a condition so painful that your knuckles are all bent over, and she's in a bed occasionally being turned around as they could adjust the pillows to prevent the bed sores, and she's pounding out with the knuckles of a deformed hand this: "He giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction, he addeth his mercy. To multiplied trials, his multiplied peace. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, where our strength has failed ere the days have done. When we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving has only begun. Fear not that your need shall exceed his provision. Our God ever yearns his resources to share. Lean hard on the hand everlasting availing. Our Father, both thee and thy load will bear. His love has no limit, his grace has no measure, his power has no boundary known unto man. For through his infinite riches in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again." The eternal arithmetic of bridging that call and the calling, before we dive into our 4 moods, is this: you plus God equals enough. You plus God equals enough. Now, when I was growing up, my mother would ask me to put all kinds of symbols on the exam paper saying maybe that'll allow you to study better. I said, "Mom, if you're an idiot like me and you haven't studied and you put all signs over there with whatever color, nothing is going to happen. They're still going to ask the wrong questions," which means I never was a bad student. They just didn't ask me the right questions. Now, in my own defense, there is one pet peeve I do have, and I went and found that teacher and told her so later on. In spelling, which I thought I was very good at, I would always get 99 out of 100, and I was angry because I couldn't spell September. Later on in life, I found out it's because that yokel was pronouncing it September. So that wasn't my fault. It was her fault. She just didn't know how to pronounce. But that's a different issue. Let's introduce you to the 4 things. In anything you do in life, if you adopt these 4 moods, they'll work. First, the foundation. The foundation. What is the foundation of what you do? For me, my foundation has 6 questions that I ask. An investigative journalist would ask these 6 questions before he built any story to report. Why don't we have those 6 questions at our foundation to build our story so we can report? First, who are you? Role identity. I met a guy on a plane the other day. I said, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." He said, "Oh, I'm the East Coast director for West Coast products produced in the North for sale in the South." I said, "You're a salesman. Why are you making up all these titles?" When I went away to America, my dad would say, "Stop telling people you're a salesman. Tell them something else. My friend's son is an automotive dispensation technician." I said, "He sends out cabs." A fuel efficiency engineer pumps gas. You can make up titles. It won't amount to anything. But when you come to your grave, there are only two statements you can make, no matter how good your resume is or how much your net worth is. I wish I had, or I'm glad I did. I wish I had is one of regret. I'm glad I did is one of cohesion, completion. Don't go through life competing with everybody. Grow through life completing something. The difference between competing and completing is one letter in the English vernacular, L. And that could be quite a loss. Everybody's competing with everybody, trying to one up the other person. The car you drive, the house you live, where you sit, who you sit with. Nobody cares. If you're living your life and your career to leave an inheritance, those that get it, really glad you're dead. But if you want to leave a name, I shared this morning, when my mother died, I went into the grocery store because they asked me to buy supplies because all the people were going to come and mourn. And I opened my wallet to pay cash. This has nothing to do with faith. They were participating in some rituals that I didn't agree with, but my mother still, and I went to buy the provisions that my cousin asked me to get. When I opened my wallet, the guy says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm paying for the provision." He said, "In this store, the only name you need is Dhanam." I haven't lived in that town for 40 years. My pop left me a good name. A good name is worth more than silver and gold. Your reputation determines your affiliation. Your affiliation determines your reputation. What is your reputation in the market? What do people think about you? Character is the ability to have pride in the mundane. Character is who you are when nobody is looking. So the 6 questions: who are you? Second, where do you come from? I'll always be the little kid from Visakhapatnam who had a dream. No matter where in the world I go, my bio says born in coastal Andhra Pradesh. I don't run from it. Be proud of where you start. Who are you? Where do you come from? Third question, whom do you credit with who you have become? You want to bridge that gap? Make sure, according to John Maxwell, you have something called the law of the inner circle. The law of the inner circle simply states that you have some people who are non-negotiables. My bride, my son, my parents, my in-laws, my best friends. If they give me advice, if they call me and say, "I need you to make a course correction," I will do it because I know they love me enough that they want me to succeed. Whom do you credit with who you've become? Remember this, if you want to bridge the gap between your career and your calling, get away from the destructive critics and start embracing the constructive critics. The destructive critics are people who find fault like there's a reward for it. The constructive critics truly want you to succeed. Who are you? Where do you come from? Whom do you credit? Question 4, what makes you laugh? And I think people need to laugh. In fact, I'm called the laughing evangelist. But everywhere I go, people are so serious. There's some new scientific evidence now come out. If you have a tendency to laugh and you suppress the laughter, it'll come back inside and make you fat. See how easy it was to laugh? But we suppress the laughter because we want to walk around as if we've got a chip on our shoulder. We're so logical. This is a nation of the most logical people who never laugh but don't understand. A straight line means a line. You go to the airport, everybody is zigzagging. I was in the counter the other day standing in line talking to the guy, and this other guy comes right here. I mean, a little deodorant would have helped, but I smelt him first. As he perked up next to me, I said, "Dude, I've got the thing." He said, "I'm also here." This is not a Star Trek episode where I'm wondering in which black hole I've disappeared. This is linear. What do you mean I'm also here? That makes no sense. But it was legitimate. I'm also here. What part of one person, one contact, somebody forgot to teach him? That's when I really want to lose my Christian identity and go into nonverbal communication. But you have to hold your restraint. What makes you laugh? For me, ignorance makes me laugh. Sometimes I'll be in the airport and say, "Oh, going somewhere, brother?" "No, I just came to see them land and take off." You're in a movie theater. Picture చూడడానికి వచ్చారా లేదండి ట్రైలర్ చూసి వెళ్ళిపోతానండి. What the heck are you talking about? Common sense. Number 5 is hard. What makes you grieve? If what you're seeing around in the world is not causing you a culture shock at the character level, you are now directly responsible for leaving our children a world worse than we inherited. What makes you grieve? It's sad. Sad. In God's holy writ, the only word God abhors is pride. And we gave them a month. The only covenant God made with his people that he would never destroy them again was a rainbow. And we now parade it as a flag. Maybe we should stop saying God bless us and start getting down on our knees and say, God save us. God save us. What makes you grieve? If you don't wake up every day grieving for humanity, you're not bridging that call. There are 8.2 billion people on planet Earth right now. And God, in his infinite wisdom, made only one you, broke the mold. Your cheekbones, your hair, your DNA, your facial features, there's only one you in all of the planet. And if the creator of the universe could see such majesty in the unique distinction of how he morphed you and framed you, why are you waking up and going with the flow? Folks, if you let someone else row your boat, they're going to take it to where they want to go, not where you want to go. Foundation. Who are you? Where do you come from? Whom do you credit? What makes you laugh? What makes you cry? And last one, what gives you hope? Alfred Adler, the great psychologist, said hope is the foundational quality of all change. John Maxwell said if there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. Once you understand the foundation of who you are and ask those questions, the career, the call, restlessness comes when we try to do something we think we're good at just because it feeds our ego. And many of us come up short when we choose careers that feed our ego. I would actually ask you to do something honorably with integrity so you can feed your family. Feeding ego is easy. Have you ever noticed some people will brighten up every room if they left? Some people are so narrow-minded, they look through a keyhole with both eyes. They said this girl was so narrow-minded, her earrings were touching. You know, we live in very fickle times. But what are the simple things? One guy came up to me and said, sir, I like what you're saying. My career is really clashing with my family. They don't want me to do what I'm doing. And after I'm talking to you, it's like I should be talking to my wife. And he's going through his whole, I was not a marriage counselor. I said, what's the question? He said, how often should I tell my wife I love her? I said, before somebody else does. It's not complicated. That's why they say marriage is grand, divorce is 100 grand. And unfortunately, the church is finding it out faster than anybody else. Like this one pastor was preaching and he saw a lady walking up, and then as she came closer, he realized it was his wife. Came even closer, he realized she had a basket of clothes on her head, and when she came to the front of the altar, he realized they were his clothes. She just dumped them on the altar and said, I want you to live in church. You're a better man here. That man hasn't bridged his career and his calling. That's a facade. Do you have joy? Happiness depends on happenings. But joy is undiluted, it's unadulterated, it's pure. My definition of joy is I have to hear my sweet bride of 37 years, who I have left at home more times as I answered my call. I have to hear her voice first thing in the morning and last thing at night. Even tonight, she will wait wherever she is, knowing I get restless. I can't sleep if I don't hear her saying, I love you and I'm proud of you. Small things that make a huge, monumental difference. We've been apart most of our married life. Someone asked her to define her call as a woman who stayed home. She runs my company now, but here's what she said. Our marriage was never designed to be one of proximity. It was ordained to be one of illustration. I'm not worried about the sacrifice on this side. I'm waiting to get to the other shore. And I want to see the long line of people who are going to come and greet me saying, thank you, Mrs. Dhanam, for letting him go. Because you let him go, I know Jesus. What is your call? I was riding the height of corporate glory. 2006, I'd become the vice president of global operations for the Zig Ziglar Corporation. 2006, God's call on my life is as sure as I'm talking to you. I made you famous. Now it's my turn. And I went in and resigned. How do you do that? You have to believe that whoever is going to take you to the very heights of prominence, if circumstance knocks you down to the very bottom of despair, he will still catch you. The food we eat on the mountaintop has always only grown in the valley. Nothing grows on the mountaintop. It is in the middle of doubt and despair, disbelief and despondence that you cry out and say, I am created by you, unique in all of human history. What is your seal upon me? And that begins to change the picture. Now, remember, the reason I gave you the 3 stories is I gave you the story of a billionaire. That can be too. Don't hear what I'm not saying. Money is not everything, but it ranks reasonably close to oxygen. When you need it, there is no substitute. Money bought me a house. Actually, it bought me 2. It'll never buy me a home with laughter. It bought me a bed, never a good night's sleep. It bought me a companion, never a friend for life. It bought me a good time, never peace of mind. I like the things money will buy, but I love the things money can't buy. And when you understand that difference, this third part will make sense. So first was the foundation. Second is the definition. Who are you in this process? Definition has 2 words: pride, a healthy self-pride. I have planned, I have prepared, and because I'm ordained, unique in creation, I can now expect. Balance. How do you live out a 24-hour existence? If you are married, learn to love your mate through the eyes of the one who created her and forgave her too. And when you see the God of the universe cannot find fault with the one you're married to, how can you, mere mortal? Foundation, definition. Third is expansion, real quick. Expansion. Where are you going? How are you going to get there? Are you going to look back? Are there regrets? Billy Graham was asked this question. Do you have any regrets? He said, I'm pretty sure if I had to dissect, I would, but I'm not going to admit them because I love where I am, and my and my regrets are part of the experience. They made me who I am. I wouldn't change one thing about life, and there have been some hardships. There have been some horrible days when you're in the gutter wondering if you're ever going to get out. Someone asked me, what do you want said at your funeral? I want the preacher to say, I think he's still moving because I still have things to do. I'm not ready to go. But if you ever came to my funeral, I want the preacher to say, proud husband, loving father, suffering servant of his sovereign Lord. That's it. They're not going to say author, speaker, writer, company owner, this, that. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. Expansion. What are the goals you're setting with yourself? Now, folks, goals are nothing more than dreams with feet. But just realize this: alcoholics have goals. Drug addicts have goals. Bank robbers have goals. Having a goal is easy. Having a goals program that has honesty and integrity is what will change the trajectory. So here in expansion, I always get this question. What is the difference between talent and strength? Talent is from God. Dr. Martin Luther King said, God has given everybody some amount of talent. He's given some more than others, but not left anyone without any. And the parable of the talent tells us, to one he gave 5, to one he gave 3, to one he gave 1. The one he hoarded, he said, wicked and slothful. Talent is from God. Strength is man manifested. Most people never bridge the gap because they go to their grave with their finest talent still within them because they hung around the wrong man pool. This is where you have to overcome fear. If you want to bridge that call, go to where you rightfully think you belong. Stand on the periphery of there and hope and pray and wish as you prepare that by sheer centripetal force you'll be sucked in. When I went to America and I wanted to become a communicator, people would look at me and say, Well, you got a distinct accent, you got a different accent. So what? Accents throughout the history of humanity have always been geographic. They're not genetic. You just change a word here, you increase an inflection there, you change the vernacular here, and you replace it with another word there. And before long, you're speaking a universal dialect, and you're allowed to make your commerce in every country that speaks it. Where's the fear? Fear is nothing more than false evidence appearing real. Medical people will tell you that 77% of most illnesses are psychosomatic, made up in the head. Coulda, woulda, shoulda, hesitation hill. 77% of all self-talk is negative. It won't happen for me. I'm the little guy from the wrong side of the tracks. My father and mother beat me as a child. Whatever it is, we make up all of those issues, and it's all about, if I had their life, I had his qualification, I had that. In the world we live in, perception is fact. Fact is never fact. So the four moods, where are you at the foundation? What are you doing as you define who you are and what you do? What is your expansion? Where do you want to arrive? How do you want to arrive there? What do you want said about you? I had a guy from Bangalore come up to one of the places I was with a small newspaper wrapped box that had oil dripping from it. So it was either something savory or something sweet that he could purchase at a local sweet shop. He drove about 120 kilometers on a moped because he heard I was in town. When he came, he fell at my feet, not something I would endorse. He says, "You're my guru." I said, "I don't even know you." He said, "Yeah, about 6 years ago, a BPO came into our area. They needed people with a modicum of English speaking. I had no English language skills at all. Someone said that, hey, there's a guy named Krish who went from your neighborhood to America. He teaches communication. He's got a YouTube channel." So this guy started following and imitating me. He learned English, watching my clips, taking my advice, opening a dictionary. But here's the amazing part. This was the confidence I loved in that little kid. He said, "Sir, if you ever get a sore throat and cannot do your talk, call me. I know how to do it with your accent." Well, that's confidence. That's power. But 6 years. Someone asked me this morning, where did you develop? If you open the dictionary and start with A, you'll find a verb, of a noun, a description of fruit. And before you leave the very first word described in the dictionary, you will have enhanced your vocabulary. You will begin to understand about what others do. Vince Roberts was a cab driver in Ottawa, Canada. 5th grade education, a career going nowhere, a business that was struggling, picking up people from the airport and dropping them at hotels. Everybody in his cab was wealthy. And one day he bought a dictionary. Incidentally, you know why Webster wrote the dictionary? Every day his wife kept saying, "What does that mean?" No. So, so before he got a quarter of an inch thick through that dictionary, he began to understand the conversations that were taking place that businessmen were conducting in his cab. He started to understand that there was something called a stock market. He started to understand that there was something called philanthropy. He started to understand that there was something called a well-rounded life. John Wesley's model: make all you can, save all you can, give all you can. It didn't happen that year, it didn't happen the next year, but 5 years later, Vince Roberts bought that 19-car cab company because of stock advice he had picked up because of reading the dictionary and understanding the people in his cab. Till he died in the mid-70s, he traveled all over the world telling people how he did it. Georgetown Johns Hopkins Medical University came up with this conclusion. In 100% of the cases, if your vocabulary increases, your IQ grows. You can get out of school, it's sometimes easy. You will never grow out of life, and it's never easy. And I'll close with this statement, and then we'll take some questions. If standard of living is your number one priority, quality of life will never follow. If quality of life is your number one priority, standard of living will always follow. One quick funny joke, because I have to tell you this about perception. My mother, bless her heart, was a very simple woman, but very set in her ways. As I was going to the elementary school, my mother found out that there was some new place of worship, how she worshiped. And that place of worship apparently needed coconuts. And my mother would say that once a month on a certain day, if I took a coconut to that dude and he busted the coconut and consecrated it, then somehow I'd become smart and get better exam results. Now, I want you to picture this scene. A boy of 7 and 8 with all the temptation of truancy on his mind is being given the sweet nectar of the gods, a coconut and coconut water. And the water is, and I'm not seeing it because that guy's using it. So I had a friend by the name of Vikram, the first management consultant. And I think maybe this is where my career began to bridge that life has to be unorthodox. Vikram bought a hammer one day and he said, here's what we're going to do. Forget that dude. He's the middleman. We're going to eliminate the supply chain. I'm going to bust the coconut. I've even bought a glass. We'll collect the water. Hot, it's summer, it's Vizag. There is nothing more sweet than that delicate liquid going down your throat. He said, now we will partake in half the coconut over the course of the day so we don't succumb to temptation. I will bless the other half, you give it to your mother. And that went on for 4 years. I got married, I went away to the West, I established a career, I wrote books, I decided confession was good for the soul. So I came back and told my mom. I said, Amma, you remember the coconut? She said, yes. I said, Vikram was blessing it. Honest to God, here's what this educated woman said, using that South Indian catch-all phrase, Ayyo. She said, Ayyo, that's why we've been having all this bad luck. Think about that as you laugh and chuckle through life. What are the situations in your life that you have attributed to random time plus matter plus chance? What are the things in your life you have attributed as a wandering generality? Instead of saying, God, I want to be a meaningful specific. Thank you for creating me, making me unique in all of creation, placing me right where I am. Do you realize that wherever you live is the geographical center of your universe, and the furthest you can go from there is 12,000 miles before you'll start back? Karl Barth said, none of us can go back and make a brand new beginning, but all of us can start now and make a fantastic ending.